Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Brian Brurud on the line, and he is founder and CEO of Check Six. Brew, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Adam. It's a real pleasure to be here.
All right, Bruce. So I'm excited to get into today's topic. So we'll talk about improving human performance, specifically in high consequence industries. So what does high consequence industries mean? Well, we're gonna let you unpack that for us and really talk about what Check Six is doing and why it's so important. But before we do that, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all, with our Mission Matters Minute. So, Brew, we at Mission Matters, we amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Brew, what mission matters to you?
Accomplishment. And typically it's in the form of accomplishment of what our customers want to do. We operate as a catalyst to get from a current state to a future state. And we do it quicker, faster, funnier. And I'll get into that a little bit later on. But what really, the mission that floats my boat and the people at Check Six boat is making a difference. Not just accomplishing objectives, but making lofty differences that affect individuals of teams and the collective efforts of those teams that deliver predictable outcomes to include profitability of businesses, and most importantly, the safety and welfare of those people that are in those challenging businesses. And when we say high consequence environments, it ties into that. I mean, that's a bit of a relative term. I mean, anybody who's an entrepreneur that has to make sure there's more money coming in than goes out so that there's profit involved there. With them, everything in their business is high consequence. So that doesn't really narrow it down much. But when you put it in perspective that there are some industries out there where the amount of capital investment is so enormous, the reliance on a very broad, diversified crew force is a success to making business plans operate. We have proven to be quite successful in going in and husbanding that effort to align all that. Now, in high consequence industries, it's one of those deals where a single catastrophic event can completely destroy that enterprise. Or the financial and the health and safety issue involved with that is so enormous that you can't envision it happening, or you just can't tolerate it. Examples of that are a nuclear reactor melting down and having a Chernobyl type thing. Does anybody want that, or can we afford that? And the answer is no. So that's the mission that matters most to me. One is making a difference, but not just a difference where you're profitable, but it's making a difference that affects the lives of people and the sustainability of incredibly challenging enterprises.
Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, this is a unique interview with your background, which we'll go into in a moment, but love bringing entrepreneurs and executives on the line to really share why they do what they do, like what their mission is, what gets them motivated. And as you said, floats your boat. So I'll take your words on that one, Brew. But maybe just to get us kicked off here, let's go into your background a little bit. So prior to starting and founding Check Six, like how'd you get started? Like, tell us a little bit more on how this took place.
Well, it's a really good question, and one I like to share a lot with entrepreneurs because, and I know we've got a bit of an international audience here, but I've been a bit of a serial entrepreneur from the get-go, and it's an American dream, to be honest with you. I started out early. I had an agriculture background. My father was he worked for an oil company in the marketing department. That really wasn't his passion. Horses and cattle was his passion. He used that to afford the other. But my brother and I were was help that couldn't quit.
Yeah.
He was our dad. We had to kind of go that way. So
Yeah.
started out learning a work ethic from my mother and father, and then began my entrepreneurial journey in 8th grade when I started a small engine repair company. And then that ended up, I went into the, myself and another buddy went in and started cutting firewood in high school, and then became a geologist in college and a horseshoer as well. And I learned early on that, business principles that you have to have and so forth. So I always dreamed bigger than myself, it seemed like, and I thank my folks for that in this great country. So in the course of all this stuff, I ended up in Alaska on the North Slope, drilling for oil and gas up there as a geologist, and just absolutely learned what human potential was about. North coast of Alaska, 80 below through the winter, and the amazing accomplishment that happens really had an effect on me at that time. Coincidentally, 2 years after that amazing education, oil hit about $8 a barrel. Yeah. And I needed to find another job. And I saw an ad after I was in total darkness, 123 miles from the North Pole. And I opened a San Francisco newspaper, and there's an ad in there, an advertisement that said, "Get an office with a view, Navy officer programs." And it had a picture of a pilot breaking over a flight deck looking down.
Wow.
And I thought, and I'm looking out the window, it's 80 below. There's a rabid snow fox walking by, and I'm going, I could use an office with a view, because it is desolate. Think Siberia on steroids. That's what it was. And so I ended up joining the Navy, and next thing you know, I'm flying F-14s off of aircraft carriers. And it was an education of incredible proportion. And it's one of those things that you have to go through it really to understand it. They make movies about that stuff, but really it was such a gift. The talents that are imparted upon you out of necessity and survival are incredible. And they have and that is why we're able to accomplish great things, is because the people that I met in that whole enterprise are some of the most amazing, fascinating people ever. And it's incredibly diverse, which shows the power of that. But when they all come together and pull on the rope at the same time, it's magical what happens. History gets made that way. And accomplishment beyond the individual, where the sum of the parts are exponentially more than the individuals that are out there. And it's an amazing thing to see. And that was a perspective that still holds with me to this day. And that what the normal layman, or even the professional for that matter, thinks that humans can accomplish, you got to multiply that by 10, because that's really the potential, or more than that, of what people get out of that. And it's why we're successful in what we focus on that does that. And I know we'll talk about that in a little bit, but or I think we will. If not, I'll remind you. But we'll.
No, we're all good, Bruin. I'm just sitting here, and I'm inspired, man. I'll tell you, I was thinking about this. Well, first off, that's funny. We were help that couldn't quit. It sounds like your dad and my dad had some of the same playbook. I thought Labor Day was for labor until I was probably a teenager. I thought that's what the day off from school was. It was to help dad. That's what I was told.
Well, all that means is we're probably related, because I have a theory that the beautiful gene pool in California came from Oklahoma when the smart ones decided to leave during the Dust Bowl and the Depression back in the 30s.
So taking it a step further, and obviously your background accomplished. I mean, Navy, you're an entrepreneur from a very young age. And, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that will watch this even now and going on into the future. And, this has been, for context, we're recording this in 2022 in January. So beginning of 2022, lots of things have happened over the last year and a half, 2 years. Lots of businesses are being affected, a lot of change going on. What kind of words, based off of your experience and obviously hindsight being more 2020, the ups and downs of business and entrepreneurship in life, what kind of words would you tell to maybe some of those entrepreneurs out there that are rethinking their businesses or, how they're going to move forward? What kind of things would you tell them?
That is a really good question, Adam.
Yeah.
The thing about entrepreneurs is we're wired a little bit different.
Yeah.
No doesn't mean much to an
That's
entrepreneur.
an understatement, Brew. A little different. We're different. Go ahead, please.
And the whole point to that is accomplishment. You got to make it work. So how do you make it work? Legally, of course, and within reason, without and do it with proper risk management so nobody gets hurt on those sorts of things. But resilience is probably the biggest attribute any entrepreneur can have. And part of that attribute of being an entrepreneur is you've got your drum and you march to it, and not necessarily everybody else does, but your skills in being able to motivate and align a team that can accomplish more than the individual can is absolutely essential. So all of those skills of leadership, process, and culture, those big three things really apply to an entrepreneurial organization. And many times, it's very easy as an entrepreneur to go out and think you've got a better mousetrap, and this is me, and then this is the rest of the world revolving around me, and that has a half-life to it that's not very profitable. So resilience, thinking ahead, and utilizing all available resources. I had a third grade teacher that gave me some of the best advice to our class ever. And it was use what you have at hand. And that begs the question, well, what do I have to hand? But that's the starting catalyst for an entrepreneur to really find out what's in their toolbox and what they can use. So that's probably what I have. Resilience is an attribute, and you're going to be limited if you don't have to go through trying times. When you go through trying times, you learn a lot of ways to skin a cat and be successful. And like our part was such a challenge because we go to where our customers are. When the world shut down for COVID, there goes your business. So we had to get incredibly creative to deliver value that was worth what people were paying for it, and to get very creative to be compliant, yet be able to travel around the world and still provide our services. And for us, that really wasn't that big of a well, we made it look easy, is what I'll have to say. Was it easy? No, but with the talent that we get, and most of them, if not all of them, are former military that are specialists. I mean, they've walked the walk of taking something that was not the best in the world and making it the best in the world, or in some cases doing it over and over and over again, because that's just the nature of that business. It's short service people that you have to get to operate as one team in a very short period of time, or you may not be in that job very long. And that's the measure of merit. The health, welfare, maintenance, training, competency of the people around you. And boy, is that a mouthful, in accomplishment and others. The thing is that there's techniques and traits to accelerate all of that, which adds to bottom line effects and more positives than negatives against that. So.
Awesome. And so Brew, let's go a little bit further, because I do want to talk more about your crew, because it's unique. When I was preparing for this interview and I was looking at the website, and I'm looking at one after another, and I'm like, wait a minute, like, what a roster. So maybe I want to learn more about Check Six. So I mean, you have an amazing crew. When I was preparing for the interview, I looked up the website and I'm looking at it, and just like person after person, I mean, you have some all-stars there. So maybe start off by just telling us a little bit more about Check Six.
Sure. Check Six began in part by accident, but to me, it's an interesting story. At the time, I was flying for FedEx. I was flying for the Arkansas Air National Guard, and then doing. I was marketing directional drilling technology as a sales consultant for a rather large oil field service company.
Yeah.
And was basically working all the time and having a blast doing it. And on a Sunday, I get a phone call from a gentleman I knew in passing. His name's Gordon Schritter. He's a Canadian, and he's just an amazing man. I just love him to death. And so he calls me up on a Sunday, and he says, "Hey, I'm reading this white paper from this PhD in behavioral science," and her name was Dr. Rona Flynn, and she had 10 years before this conversation. This was 1997. She writes this white paper, and it was specific to ultra deep water drilling operations, and there's a lot of issues with that technology and otherwise. But she wrote this paper that made 2 points, and Gordon was reading it, and he goes, "What the heck is she talking about?" And the 2 points she made was, if you're going to do these kinds of operations in ultra deep water, you need to do 2 things. One is run it like a nuclear aircraft carrier. And the second part was have fighter pilots and astronauts teach it. And so he's going over that, and he goes, why is she saying this? Because it was just a page and a half. It was easy read, and it was brilliant. And so I explained to him how we're able to take 5,000 short service people that staff a nuclear aircraft carrier. That from one deployment to an 18-month turnaround and another deployment, you have up to an 85% turnover in people.
Wow.
And that goes from the admiral all the way down. Everybody's new. It's a new team. So you have a finite period of time to get to a precise level of execution. You're running nuclear aircraft carriers on a boat. I mean, come on. And then you've got, 80 to 100 aircraft on this thing that you can launch 4 of them in a minute. So in 4 minutes, you can put up firepower that can't be matched anywhere in the world. The other part of that is that you have to feed 5,000 people 3 meals a day, and I mean, it's just a crazy accomplishment, but it's so brilliant how they do that. Now, the military is far from perfect. I mean, it is far from perfect.
Sure.
But boy, are there places in there where excellence just exudes itself, and it can be replicated. It can be replicated in the private sector. And that's kind of what we've been able to do. Because at the end of this conversation with Gordon, he goes, "I've got a couple of deep water rigs, and I'm blowing through $1.3 million a day per rig. And I'm hurting people, and we do things twice a lot." Now, at that rate, twice a lot means an opportunity cost of about $17 a second. Of downtime. You take refining, you're up to $166 a second for a 300 barrel a day refinery. And that goes on and on and on across various industries and so forth. So Gordon, then he goes, "Well, could you take that Top Gun stuff and put it in a syllabus that I could deploy out to my rigs?" And of course, I said, "Sure," and hung up the phone and did what every entrepreneur does, is going, "How in the hell am I going to do that?" And so I did what my 3rd grade teacher said. I inventoried what I had at hand, and I had a lot. I had the finest human talent ever created by man in one place. And that's what I thought when I finally got in a ready room and was a part of that. I couldn't believe I even was there. And the other one was, the more that I was around these incredible people that at that point in time could have done anything in life, but they decided to commit it to their country and be masterful, best in the world at operating a machine. Now, what goes with that in the Navy in particular is a leadership skill that is absolutely priceless. And what people are learning in this world today
Yeah.
is that leadership attribute is probably the most priceless commodity that any professional can have. And we help them with that.
So you have this idea, and then based off of this phone call, and so now, how did the next part of this journey look like? Because you go from many entrepreneurs, you go from concept to then execution. Like, tell a little bit more about like recruiting the team, like how your current team. Like, tell us a little bit more about what went into building that.
Well, it was very personality based to begin with, because I knew these people firsthand, and it takes a special mentality, it takes a special personality, and then it also takes a resume and of accomplishment that goes with it. Taking teams, and it's not necessarily having a good team and keeping it there is a different challenge. And in some cases, it's a harder challenge. But for the most part, if you walk into a team that's in its infancy or has proven a bit dysfunctional or all that stuff, we've been there, done that so many times, and there's ways to overcome that in a very rapid period of time. So it started that way, and then everybody knows somebody else. We're always 2 degrees of separation from something. So, and the other part of it is that I've seen veterans and what their options are when they leave service. Yeah. And a lot of times you get so wrapped up in that world that you don't really realize what your true value and potential are out in the private sector. And so I look at Check Six as a catalyst of taking this incredible talent, adding to it an understanding of business, and then we go out and help our customers accelerate getting to what their objectives are. And coincidentally, we're able to do it where the value we return is, to say it's 10 times what we get paid is probably an understatement in some areas. And so
I want to go further down the path of what it means, sir, because I know one of the things that you're working with or strive for is working with high reliability organizations. Can you maybe define that and tell us like what that means, high reliability organizations?
It's probably a bit synonymous to the high consequence industries. It's one of those things where the consequence of human failure, a single human failure, can bring down a complete organization. Yeah. And you've got, and we've got recent examples of that. You look at the Macondo incident for an oil field example, but we have that with a lot of things. When you break all of that stuff down and what caused it, it wasn't blowout preventers. It was humans. It was, and nothing against the heroics of the people that did amazing things to save life and preserve it. But at the end of the day, assumption and a deficiency in present leadership led to that catastrophe. My mindset that we could have prevented that. A bit of that high reliability industry and nuclear aircraft carriers, we went through, what I brag about today, we had an entire history that is not something worth bragging about. We've broken things, killed people, our own people, through learning the things that we share with the private industry. We've had operations where it's always measured in life and death and preservation of resources, and we've proven that we can not do that in the Navy in the history of before, but we reached some points where we just could not afford it anymore. And healthcare is one that needs to be high reliability, but it's not there yet. Oil and gas is one that needs to have that predictability, and it's not quite there yet. Lots of improvements have been made on that as well. We're finding out in construction, same sort of issue where you have big projects, low margins. All you have to do is lay down the wrong piece of asphalt or concrete and you're ripping it out, and there goes your profit. And you can't stay in business that way. But you need reliability of the most unreliable component, and that's usually the human.
Yeah.
And so that's what we focus on, and it's what we take from one hand over here, match it up with our experience and how humans interact and their limitations, just like equipment, and then we put them through a program that accelerates the skill set that's required, puts the infrastructure of process and procedures on a level that it's used instead of put in a book and put on a shelf somewhere. And we also make that culture of cross checks, mutual support, and supervision. And each one of those has its own litany of stuff to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But those three things, if you have them, you can actually get by on two of those three things working well. But if you get all three of those things working well, you can basically paint the future picture that you want to have happen.
So let's go a little bit further into the leadership side of things. So I don't want to oversimplify this, because I know you're working with, very large companies, and as we keep saying, high consequence industries. So, but I want to go further into the idea of leadership and what that means as you train and as you teach through your processes at Check Six. Specifically because I feel like, and I could be wrong, so please correct me if I am, but I feel like the level of leadership and what's needed to execute and to become one of these high reliability organizations are these, and I'm not saying anybody's more special than others, but are these skills, does everybody start at maybe a base level that they can improve on? Can they get better? Or is it just assumed that the type of leadership that is involved here are just these these special people that they have to be like I'm trying to go further into kind of understanding like what it looks like to help what are already presumably high functioning leaders, how you help them get even better. Like, how does that happen? It's a lot.
That is a really good question. And leadership, first off, is in my mind, is a journey. You start out with one set of skills, and then you move to another, and in between is a life you lead.
Mm-hmm.
You have these experiences, and God willing, you end up learning from them.
Yeah.
But what we do is we do a couple things. One is we explain these principles and traits that all add up to this thing called leadership. The other one is that we have this skill set, not just an academic skill set, but it's one of experience where we can speak directly to every one of those attributes and give tools and techniques on how to develop that personally. And so we do a lot of one-on-one work with senior, middle, and entry-level management. And the other thing is we also do it with frontline folks, because the earlier you start getting them on this leadership bandwagon of skill set development, now you've got a succession plan where you can take leaders that have evolved, and because it'll be obvious, you give, the diversity is just like the people are down there, but same way with picking up leadership skill sets. Some of them pick it up quicker than others. Some of it just by their background have an advantage over others, but that is one priceless attribute. And if you put it in comparison to, our background is we couldn't motivate in the military anybody with money, because that's driven by factors outside of what we could control. The only thing you have to motivate, congeal a team is that leadership skill set. And it's an awful lot of care, concern, and effort that goes towards your people. Their success is your success. Their failure is not so much their failure, but it's your failure. And that's not immediately apparent to everybody when they come out of the womb and have a few years on this earth. But if your life depends on it, it's amazing how interested you get in the people around you that are fixing airplanes, and you get in an operational role where that mission is what's important, and trying to get the assets to do it and still be compliant with incredible safety controls and all that is it's almost like you have to experience to understand it. But but it certainly applies to the private sector. And our biggest joy is, part of that mission part is watching the people that we have the pleasure and privilege of working with apply these things and absolutely go beyond their own expectation, much less their chain of command's expectation on what they can accomplish and how they can get people to align and move in one direction to accomplish common objectives and be rewarded accordingly.
Tell me a little bit about the what it takes to build a culture that really thrives in this type of atmosphere. And I'm not looking, obviously, every company is going to be a little bit different, right? But I feel like there has to be certain themes or certain ingredients that go into making a culture that works in these atmospheres.
Culture is an interesting thing, and there's folks that have been credited with this quote, but strategy is one thing, but culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
And you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have a culture to execute it, it's essentially worthless. And it's great thought, but it doesn't accomplish anything. Leadership drives culture. So you've got these codependency components in there, but the leadership attribute that is basically one that's set on the golden rule: treat people as you want to be treated. Remind everybody what their value is in accomplishing something greater as a team than themselves. That constant reinforcement that what they're doing is actually more important than what their particular role is and their role in that, and all of that. And its persistence. It's just like ties back into that resilience part as an entrepreneur. The leadership never ends. It's an eternal commitment, and it delivers results that are basically priceless. And that doesn't matter what industry. It could be everything from forestry to space to you name it. Whatever it is, if it's got people and a budget, these types of things are value added and deliver a return on investment.
Awesome. So, Brew, tell us a little bit more about the industries that you work with over at Check Six. Tell us a little bit more. I think oil and gas is one. Give us a little bit of a flavor for the clients that you're serving.
Yeah, that's a good question too. Check Six, we cut our teeth, like I said, with Gordon calling up and asking a question, and then he says, "Well, put that on 2 of my rigs and let's see what happens." I had no idea what was going to happen, but it worked. I mean, $150 million wells soon became $100 million wells. So any capital enterprise where you can cut 30% off of your cost to get to where you're wanting to go is a good thing. So that was the start. The other part is we saw that there were avenues that the exact same criteria would be desired in these industries, and manufacturing, mining, construction, port facility management, to take private equity money that goes in and invests in an enterprise, and it may not go so well. Well, we can help get it back on track and on timeline. All of that kind of basically any industry with a budget, a deadline, and people. And more specifically, if it's hazardous, both to either the financial business model or the people that are executing on it, we cover all of that stuff. And we don't necessarily look at safety separate from operations. We look at precision operations are inherently safe. And so that's kind of the level that we get folks to when it comes to planning operations, briefing operations, the requirements during operations of cross checks, mutual support, and supervision. And then the last part, which is probably the greatest change agent and the best thing the private sector could do to move the needle forward on whatever their objective is a culture of debriefing. Learning what we just did from it, and then applying it to operations moving forward. And that, again, is a leadership attribute to make that sort of thing happen. But the debrief is, missions I flew where you take off, get shot at a bunch, get scared to death, come back, still have to land aboard the boat,
Yeah.
What's the first thing you do? You go right down to the intelligence center
Hmm.
and explain what happened and go,
Hmm.
what in the world can we do so we don't have to do that again?
Yeah.
and guess what? You figure it out.
Hmm.
And you get a lot better, a lot quicker. And that's kind of from a military standpoint, when we deploy to go do something somewhere, we're not good for 3 days. We're not good. Communication, new people, you take a deal with all that. But after 3 days, look out, because we're the best in the world. We get better, quicker, faster than anybody in the world. And it's because of one thing: debrief. Isn't that funny?
Amazing. That's great.
But
So
I also assure you, nobody ever woke up in the morning and goes, by God, I'm going to start debriefing today. Nobody does that. I mean,
yeah.
it's a professional discipline that's learned and acquired, and then strong leadership mandates it. And the leadership technique on that is going, hey, when you get done, tell me what you came up with on your debrief. I'd really like to know. Now, that's if something goes good or if it goes bad.
Yeah.
Usually it gets it, I always get beat up in a debrief. Well, that's part of it.
Yeah.
Good ones cover, hey, if we knocked it out of the park on this, we want to keep doing that.
Yeah.
So let's know what that is, and then let's keep doing it.
Fantastic. Well, Brew, I have to tell you, I learned a lot from you today. I'm sure my audience did as well, and those that watch this interview going into the future will as well. That being said, I mean, I know a lot going on in the world, a lot going on in your sectors. What's next? I mean, what's next for you? What's next for Check Six?
Well, that's really the exciting part. I had a town hall meeting with all of my folks this morning, and it's pretty exciting what it is we've got planned to do. Obviously, we want to grow within the market regions that we're in: construction, manufacturing, transportation, oil and gas, and so forth. Healthcare is on our horizon for the exact same reason. Now, just think about that. We can make a difference in healthcare by making the things that those heroes have to do every day easier, more efficient, and be able to capture data that we can use to do things better or change management. So all of those industries are fair game that we've got inroads into and plan to expand in that. And we're really excited about making a difference in that. That's on the consulting side. We have a technology part of our business that is in its infancy, and but it's out there commercial and doing great things. And it's a digital checklist technology that helps people with the execution of their jobs and validates compliance on one hand, and on the other hand captures data at the point of execution, so that decision makers, CFOs, CEOs can make informed business decisions by knowing exactly what's going on in their production line, in their processing facilities, in their field operations. And they go from thinking to knowing what's going on, and they can make more informed decisions. I think it's a priceless attribute, but it's new to, it's going to take some adopters to understand what the value is on it. But in my mind, it's professional heroin that once you get used to that data coming in and the people in the front lines being able to take somebody relatively new and assimilate them to their team with standards, processes, and they have a tool to do it, it's absolutely priceless. So, and it's very economical.
Oh, that's awesome. That's exciting. I love to see you, really, you and your team pushing the envelope, continuing to innovate and build on what you've already done. I mean, I think it's a great success story. And that being said, so Brew, if somebody's watching this and they want to learn more about Check Six or to connect with you and your team, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, probably the best thing is go to our website. It's www.check6, you spell it out, CheckSix.com. And then go on there. And if you want to get a hold of me, my number is 918-399-0906. I ask that you send a text because I get a lot of the spam stuff that goes on. But if you send me a text, I'll be happy to call you back, or I'll get one of our amazing folks to call you back, and and happy to
Yeah.
come see you and talk to you.
That's awesome. And we'll put all that information in the show notes as well so that our audience can just head right on over, click on the link and check out the website. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters, we're a platform that's all about bringing on entrepreneurs, executives, and experts and having them share their mission. Like, why do they do what they do? What motivates them to go out there into the world and into the marketplace and to make a difference? If that's the type of content that you like or something that's interesting to you, we encourage you to hit that subscribe button because we have many more mission-based entrepreneurs and individuals coming on the line, and we don't want you to miss a thing. And Brew, really, this has been a pleasure and an honor to get your story out there and just to have some fun with you today. So thanks again for coming on the show.
Well, thank you again, Adam. And just to add to that, this experience of working with you to put this on for those out there to consider it, this has just been an absolute joy. It's a lot of content in a short period of time, which works good for a CEO that's trying to do a bunch of different things and be good at all of them, which is its own challenge. But it's really been a joy and a privilege to work with you, Adam. And I'm a fan now and addicted to your program. So for whatever that's worth, and anybody else out there that would consider this, it's value added, and it's been a real joy.
That's awesome. And thank you for that, Brew, and have a great rest of your day.
You bet. You too. See y'all.